Hello and welcome into the KE Report. Shad and Corey here, getting an update today from West Red Lake Gold, traded on the TSX.V under the ticker WRLG, and on the OTCQB under the ticker WRLGF. And we're joined today with the new Vice President of Investor Relations, Gwen Preston. And everybody probably on the call knows Gwen, and she's a friend of the show and a friend of the sector, but you've taken this role as Vice President of Investor Relations for West Red Lake Gold, and I'd love you just to unpack your thinking here, why you see the value proposition in the company, and why you're excited to have this new position.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on the show, and I'm more than happy to tell you about this move that I've made because I'm really excited. So for 10 years, I wrote a newsletter, right? I wrote the Resource Maven newsletter, and the goal of that newsletter was to help investors in the mining space maybe find the right opportunities for them, the best opportunities out there, especially in the junior mining space. And I did that by writing about what stocks I was buying and selling. And I'd done that for 10 years. I loved my time as a newsletter writer. I got to learn a huge amount about this industry, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly in terms of projects and people and capital markets, all of how it works, right? And about a year ago, when West Red Lake bought the shuttered Madsen Mine out of bankruptcy, I was like, well, that's an interesting move. And my honest reaction was the management pitched me on the idea. They're like, previous operators made lots of mistakes. We can fix the mistakes and this thing is going to work. And I was like, that seems too simple to be true. I was cynical. Then I went to visit the project last summer. I went to visit the project with a group of investors. And they had restaffed the operation to a certain extent. And a lot of the new staff were not new to the actual Madsen mine because they're mining people who live in the community. And so they came back after having worked the property under Pure Gold. And to a T, every single person who I spoke to on that trip, and we spent a lot of time at this mine site, from literally the guy sweeping the floor at the mill, all the way through to the mill superintendent, over to all the geologists, every single person who I spoke to on that trip told me the same story. And it was the story, their version, their experience of that story. And the story was always, the gold is there, but there were mistakes made in trying to get the gold out. And what really matters about that to me was two things. First of all, management wasn't making it up, right? It seemed if all of these people who went through the experience kept reinforcing the same story, okay, well, that is what happened. And they gave so many examples. They were all very tangible examples, and they were all exactly what management had described, which was they were all fixable things. So I was like, okay, that makes the story seem a lot more possible than my cynical ears had originally thought. And then I met the team. And so there's the people who are working on the mine site, but the team that I'm referencing now is the management team. So this is Shane Williams, who came on as president and CEO. I mean, he has built mines all over the world. He is a very successful mine builder. And he's also just an exceptional leader in how he communicates and how he manages people. And so he gave me a lot of confidence. Then Will Robinson, who came on as VP Exploration, does he ever give me a lot of confidence? The people who are leading the geology and engineering on the site. And then Maurice, who is the VP of Technical Services, who is stick handling the technical side of this. So not the geology side, but all of the infrastructure, milling and all of that, mining side of things. This is an impressive group of people. This is a group of people who have not just found gold, but found gold, figured it out accurately and confidently enough to mine it, have built mines around it, have operated those mines successfully. They've done it before multiple times. And I don't love spending conversations talking about what Pure Gold didn't do, but it is nonetheless a really important part of the story. One of the main reasons that they made so many mistakes is that the people who are running the company did not have that operational experience. They just didn't. They had a lot of capital markets experience. They were very successful in the capital markets, but the operational experience wasn't there. And that's where the mistakes came from. This team has that operational experience, and they've spent a year on site already figuring out what the mistakes were, how they can be fixed, what the plan is to fix them, what the timeline is to fix them, and the work is already underway. This is a very real story. And so I'm very excited to join because it's a complicated story, but it's a fantastic story. There's so much opportunity in putting this mine back into production, which is certainly our goal. And I just relish the challenge of being able to help the market understand through all of the complexity, the huge opportunity that there is in this story.
So, Gwen, you've seen from the newsletter standpoint what actually moves stocks, especially for a retail audience. And there's a lot going on at West Red Lake Gold. A lot of people focused on when the mine will be in production, what sort of cash flow that could generate. But there's a lot of drilling that's going on now. There's a lot of work that needs to be done before you even get to that point. In your eyes, almost from that newsletter standpoint, what's the work that investors will pay the most attention to that moves the needle for them?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So I think the story is at a transition point right now. It was a year ago. It was in April of 2023, late April of 2023, that this deal happened. That this tiny junior company got backed by the Fiore team, including obviously Frank Giustra, and bought the mine. And in that year, the team has raised money, dug into the asset, really understood what's going on. But there hasn't been because the group wasn't ready to be able to say with confidence and in detail all of the things that they were going to do to make this thing work. They needed to understand that list before they could start talking about that list. So for the last year, there's been drill results. That's been the primary drill results and finding good people to be on the team and trying to start telling the story of the geology from a new understanding. Right now, we're at a tipping point where a huge part of the story from here that I think is going to really matter is demonstrating the tangible work that's happening on site to get this asset ready for restart. Now, the team here has a goal of restarting this mine by the middle of 2025. And we have a goal of producing a pre-feasibility study that outlines that mine restart plan by late 2024, early 2025. So at the end, round about the end of this year, pre-feasibility study with the idea of turning the mine on roughly 6 months later. Those are our goals. But because we're starting with so much sunk capital in a mine that's already developed and a fantastic mill that's already built, we aren't approaching turning on a mine in any kind of normal way. We have this huge asset that's already built that needs some fixing. And when we make a restart decision, we want all of the critical path items on that restart plan to be already underway. We don't want there to be anything in our way that prevents us from reaching those timeline goals. And there's projects that take time, and there's projects that take money, and there's projects that take both at the mine site to get this thing ready for restart. And pretty soon we're going to be able to, we're working on a news release right now to try and explain some of those projects. But I think the market is going to really appreciate and start really appreciate understanding all of the things that we're doing that are underway right now. They aren't, we're going to do these things. They aren't, it's in the plan to do these things. They're happening right now. And as these critical path tasks get checked off, it will just become increasingly apparent that restart isn't an idea. Restart is like coming towards us quite quickly as a reality. So I think we are at a transition point. The drill results will continue to matter. One of the most fantastic aspects of this asset undoubtedly are the grades that this thing, right? The resource averages almost 8 grams per ton gold. And then, there's sometimes much splashier numbers that come out. There's other zones that haven't seen as much work that we want to target so that we can maybe give people a little vision towards the down the road potential that we think this asset might offer. So those drill results will also continue, but I really think that the market is going to start paying attention to the reality of this thing becoming a restart.
Yeah, Gwen, I think it's really a unique story because as someone that I was invested with Pure Gold during the exploration and development phase and watched all of the exploration work happen and thought, okay, they've really found a lot of good stuff here, and they were just getting into that 8 zone area at depth. But then when the mining sequence started, they stopped exploring. Since Will and the team has gotten on the ground and started doing even more drilling, it's been fascinating to watch the Austin zone, both the north, the mid, the main area, and the South Austin zone recently all develop into even more than investors were used to. And I know that drilling from underground is going to change the game as far as how they're going to access some of these higher grade pockets that are hard to hit from surface, but you can get them from underground. I may just throw in the recent press release you guys just put out on the 21st talking about grades like 37 grams per ton gold over almost 3 meters and then 5 grams per ton gold over 9 meters. These kind of high-grade hits are just sewing together an even more impressive deposit than people even knew during the pure gold days. So maybe just speak to how all of the drilling and all of the work the team has done feed into the development scenario.
Absolutely, and that's a really important point. So Jill Christensen is the lead mine geologist for us, and she had that role under Pure Gold. But of course, you can only do in your job what management sort of allows you to do. And so she had to work within those constraints when she was employed by the previous operator. And so, she's very confident in the gold that's there, but the amount of drilling, the test mining, the amount of effort and importance placed onto the geologic model, and how all of those things should, in a good mine, create a feedback loop with the mine engineering team, that just didn't happen previously. Like when I say that, there needs to be a constantly evolving and accurate, confident geologic model. There's a resource or a reserve components to that, but it's also how do the different kinds of rocks and the different kinds of folding and all the different structures, how do they impact where gold is or is not? And how does that then really drive your understanding of specifically, like, on a foot-to-foot basis underground, like where the gold will be and where it won't be? That knowledge is essential if you want to have an effective mine, because these are narrow, high-grade situations. And so that feedback loop from the geology team to the mine engineering team, it didn't really exist in the pure gold days. And one thing that I would say that one of the very most, if not, in a forward-looking sense, the most important accomplishments that West Red Lake has done in its first year on the ground at Madsen is establish that feedback loop. So, and from the geology to the mine engineering team, but also in all of the aspects of the mine. What went wrong? How are we going to fix it? How should that change our approach? For the milling people, for the people who operate the tailings facility, for all of these, even for the, managing how the money works, all of these groups, for every component of a successful mining company, there needs to be a feedback loop. And so getting back to your drilling question, there was a huge effort to build a new geologic model. And if you got Will or Jill on the phone for an interview, I mean, they would talk your ear off in a very good way about how much confidence they now have in their geologic model. That is why they are returning these phenomenal intercepts. When Will sent me over the numbers from this news release that you quoted, I was like, wow, Will, congrats, those are great hits. And he's like, all credit goes to Jill. And that's just, everybody is really working in sync. And then they work really tightly with Lindsay, who is really the lead engineer developing the mine plan. And they're all helping each other figure it out. And I think that matters in a huge way. It matters in how we're going to be able to, hopefully, continue to delineate new gold at the project, and which we've been very successful at, as you were saying, in the North and South Austin zones. And we're getting ready to step out and test some of the other zones that people are really excited for us to test, like the 8 zone. So it's going to help us continue to have success doing that, but it's also really going to help us create a mine plan, like on a stope to stope, foot by foot basis that we are really confident in.
So Gwen, taking this all big picture, the company has raised quite a bit of money over the last, let's just call it 2 months here, through 2 different offerings. Look, one thing that really got in the previous operator's way was they kept running into cash issues. This company, you've been able to raise a lot of money to keep this work going, but it does have people wondering just how much capital is it going to take to move this project forward and get into production?
Yeah, and it's a very real question, and it's a question that we're talking to investors about a lot right now. Absolutely. In the last, like you say, 2 months, we did a raise. The gold-backed notes was a $27 million raise. And then the recent financing that we did, which was roughly a month later, was a $33 million raise. Yeah, those are big numbers. Absolutely. The thing is, when West Red Lake bought this asset, there was an immediate perception, or maybe I can even use the word desire, that this could be put back into production, to just use sort of simple words, quickly and cheaply, right? And that's, in some ways, or from like a limited lens, that's the dream. Sure, like what we all want in a gold company is to make money, and that often requires that the gold company is making money. So let's turn on this mine and start making money. But the mine failed for a reason. And so that simple desire, the quick, cheap back to production, it's understandable that the market wanted that to be the story, but that wasn't really the story ever, because Shane will tell you that he never thought that it was going to be quick or cheap to put this thing back into production. What they emphasized all the way through, and what I think maybe we needed to, as a company, lean into a bit harder to make sure that the story evolved in the market's eyes, is that Shane has always said, we are going to create a mine plan that we have confidence in, like deep confidence in, before we even consider restarting this mine. And one thing I'm sort of working on in the storytelling now is what we're calling like a waterfall chart, where as we learned new things about the asset, that, you know, sparked having to do this, and it sparked having to do that, and it sparked tasks, projects on site that needed to happen. And we didn't know what all of those projects were when the company bought the mine. It's not a surprise that all of those projects cropped up, because that was the mine wouldn't have failed if there weren't a bunch of projects that needed doing, right? But it is a little tough to tell the market that, you know, it's going to take time and money for this to happen, when the market always wants everything to happen, you know, tomorrow for very little money. This is a bridge, right? This is a gap that has to be managed. What's it going to take from here? Well, we certainly have a good amount of money in the bank right now, and that's the best part about that, is just being able to focus. As I say, we're going to work really hard over the coming weeks and months to outline all of the things that we are doing on site to get this thing ready for production on our goal timeline. And with money in the bank, we can just focus on doing that, instead of having to focus on the persistent question of, when are you going to raise money next? Do we have enough money to get all the way to production? No, I wouldn't say that this is all the way to production, but the gap after this is not that bad. Shane and I are generally out there saying like 20 to 40 million after this is going to get us comfortably to production. The number will be defined in a confident way when we put that pre-feasibility study out at the end of the year.
All right, I appreciate you breaking that down. And yeah, the good part here is that there's so much sunk cost already in place that, to your point earlier, you don't have to go out and build a new plant and build a new mine. All of that's been built. So once you get to the PFS stage later this year, or maybe the beginning of next year, I'm sure it'll outline, you know, the final steps for the economic side. I guess just as we wrap up here, Gwen, maybe final takeaways you want people to know about the vision of the company and how investors should position West Red Lake Gold in their mind, because it's really, as you say, at the tipping point between the exploration side of it and the development side. How would you like to summarize it for people listening in?
Absolutely. Great. Yeah, great question. So I think we are at a tipping point here. I think the market was a bit surprised at the amount of money, and so the share price took a little hit over the last while, which, to use an overused phrase, I think does create an opportunity to get into this story at a moment when it's at a transition in the market's understanding of what it is. And we are going to demonstrate over the next little while that we are really taking concrete steps to move this thing back to production. And I mean, in a year from now, that's the middle of 2025, right? That is our goal, to have this thing on again by the middle of 2025. And we don't have unknown hurdles in there in many of the normal ways that can crop up as you're trying to put a mine back into production. Like, we don't have permitting questions and things like that. We just have to get these things done, and we're doing it. So I think anyone who likes the golden runway, the share price re-rate that happens when a company goes from spending money, like we are doing right now to get the Madsen Mine ready for a restart decision, when they go from spending money to making money, which is what we should be able to do once we put this mine back into production. We aren't turning it on unless we're very confident that we will be able to make money. That's the golden run rate. That's the share price re-rate. That's what should happen. That's our goal, is to create that opportunity for investors over the next year.
All right. Well, we'll keep following along with this golden runway and that period from development into first pour. It's going to be an exciting phase for the company. It's great to have you on board, leading the charge on investor relations. And if people want to follow along with the news for West Red Lake Gold, definitely click on the link below this interview. It takes you directly over to the company website, to the news section. Keep us posted when you do get the plans out for all the different parts and pieces that are coming together into the master plan, and we'll get somebody from the company back on to highlight those for investors. And Gwen, I wish you luck in the new role and looking forward to our next conversation.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks for the chat, and I look forward to talking to you too.